Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Letterboxing with Commentatoring Nerd. This week, there's no horror movie makeup takeover because October is over with, and no silly voice to start off the stream either. Just my silly face talking to you about movies and about to show you some slides to help me talk about some movies as well. Um, but today's show is going to be a little bit different. I'm giving myself a little bit of a buffer week, I guess I could say, between big projects. Obviously, I just came off of a horror movie makeup where I talked about 31 different um, international horror movies for all of October. That was a lot. It was a lot to watch and a lot to put together for episodes. And I need a little bit of a lower key break. However, silly me forgot that I have a lot of makeup to do as far as new releases go. So today's show is going to be completely dedicated to the What's New segment that I do. However, this is going to be the first episode where I kind of change up the format of what's new. I think going forward, I'm going to make my new release reviews much shorter uh, and just kind of give my brief thoughts about the movie. I will have my written reviews ahead of time and mostly, I'll talk about my main kind of points that I want to talk about why I liked it, why I didn't like it, but I'm not going to make a big show about it and not have as many images or things to show along the way. Just kind of quickly talk about each of the movies so I can get through them faster when they're included with other bigger projects. But also this week, I have 11 different movies to talk about because I wasn't able to talk about some of these during October because there just wasn't time. But I need to change. I feel like I need to change up the format a little bit. And new releases are tricky with a show like mine and not having very many followers or a lot of exposure to movies early. Um, it just means that any new release watching pushes back production time for the show. So basically, I have to wait until to make this show um, until I've seen all the movies that I want, and sometimes it's not until Saturday that I can really see several of the what's new movies. So some of it's saving myself, but also I don't. When I've polled with you guys before, the what's new release reviews hasn't been much of what you guys' favorite stuff is for me. And honestly, my favorite stuff to do anyway is doing the bigger kind of letterbox projects where I'm doing this big a watch list on a filmography from somebody or something else. So this is going to be the start of something new with what's new. And we're going to be talking a little bit briefer about new releases, but I still have a lot to say about these movies, so I will be relying on you guys to check out my letterbox reviews as well, like those, help get me some traction on there. Um, I'll be tweeting out those reviews for the new releases much more than I had in the past, so hopefully you guys as followers can help me kind of share those around and get the word out. Anyway, all right, so let's get started with talking about new releases. Um, I actually had there's a bunch of Netflix movies that have come out over the last month or so that have gotten a lot of attention. So first, I'm going to talk about the Netflix to-dums that I covered over the last few months, and then two of them I actually watched fairly recently, Do Revenge and Enola Holmes 2, and then also Wendell and Wild. So I'm going to talk about each of those. So Wendell and Wild is uh, a collaboration between Henry Selick and Jordan Peele, or both, I guess, Key and Peele collectively, to put together a new stop motion animation project for Netflix. This would be the first Henry Selick movie since Coraline, and of course, he's also famous for Nightmare Before Christmas. Um, Unfortunately, Henry Selick always seems to be bogged down by the different people that he's worked with and overshadowed by them. Nightmare Before Christmas is so often considered a Tim Burton movie, even though Tim Burton was the producer instead of the director. And then also, even with Coraline, I don't hear his name attached to it as much as I do it just being another one of Leica's um, like amazing stop motion animation. So it's kind of attributed to the studio more so than the director himself. So Wendell and Wild is a movie that Jordan Peele wrote and Henry Selick wrote along with him. Henry Selick directed, and this is stop motion animation about this young teenage girl. She has had a tragic life backstory, and basically her parents died in a car accident years before, and she's been bouncing around foster homes and stuff, and she's just kind of had a trouble growing up, and she makes her way back to her hometown, which is has been completely turned into a ghost town and taken over by, like, I don't know, corporate greed and a bunch of social commentary stuff that feels like it's right up Jordan Peele's alley. So uh, anyway, this movie has a lot of fun stuff though, fun imagery though too, with all the stop motion, the backgrounds of basically how this town is all set up. I love how it shows how it's changed from what it was to what it is now. I love the set of the school, and like just driving through the streets. Some of my favorite stuff is the things in the background in this movie, even more so than the characters themselves. And actually, the characters design for me on Wendell and Wild is a little bit hit or miss. Some of the faces and things are a little wonky for me. Lots of times in Henry Selick movies, that'll be the case where they're a little strange looking and they're supposed to be, but it was a little bit more so for me this time. Didn't work as well, but it did grow on me as the movie went along. But anyway, this has a lot of things about demons and hell maidens, and there's a lot of great imagery and imagination that goes into, I don't know, this idea of humans interacting with the human world interacting with the demon world, and this young girl kind of coming into her own and having a really strong character arc. The Lyric Ross is the voice actress behind the main character, Kat, and this really is a great lead character. I think this movie would fall really flat if it wasn't for this lead character being so strong. A lot of the elements are really fun in the movie, but I do feel like it's very social commentary heavy. So there's definitely seems to be a clash in styles between the Henry Selick stop motion style and what Jordan Peele wants in writing. So there is some positives and some negatives here, but overall, I think it's a good package. I give this 3.5 out of 5 stars and give it a like. Okay, so the next one from Netflix is Do Revenge. This is from director and director Jennifer Caton Robinson. Basically, this is a story about a uh, really a private preparatory high school, basically, where this queen bee character basically gets knocked down a peg. Um, she's like actually very much mistreated, and like there's a sex tape spread around by her, by presumably by her boyfriend, and then she basically loses all her status and whatever. But over the summer, she meets Maya Hawke's character, and they sort of make this budding friendship, and each have these. They're going to wind up going to the same school, and each have these grudges to settle with other people, and they decide to help each other get revenge on each other's, like, um, kind of oppressors, I guess, because nobody knows they know each other, so they can potentially, infiltrate each other's groups and do the revenge without anyone catching on what's going on. So that's basically the premise for this movie. Um, I kept hearing things about Do Revenge, so I decided to finally get around to seeing it for myself. This is one that's I kind of had on the back burner for a while, and finally I decided to put it on the other night. There were things that annoyed me throughout the movie. The tone was a little too abrasive and cringe at times, and I can't say I'm crazy about the Drea actress or character. And there's some very convenient resolutions in the writing department for the final act. However, the tone was meant to be that way. And then Maya Hawke is amazing. As soon as she enters the movie, everything kind of works better, and her character has amazing moments. And I think it does ultimately stick the landing, and I like the examination of social dynamics at play within kind of this, I don't know. Uh, Honestly, it's a bunch of rich kids going to high school, so there is some stuff that you're like, well, this is kind of this is kind of out of touch with reality, right? But the movie knows it's out of touch with reality, and it treats it that way. This movie is very heightened melodrama, and it's supposed to be, but it's almost a little bit of a parody for itself. Um, but I really like how this movie kind of progresses and some of the twists and turns, and Maya Hawke is amazing all the way through. So this movie was fun. Like it did get a little too annoying at times having to deal with these rich kid high schoolers, and some of these actors have been playing schoolers or near high schoolers for a long time, and it's a little weird seeing them still playing that. So some of that stuff got in the way of me liking this movie even more, but it's a pretty fun, enjoyable movie. I give it 3 stars and a like. All right, moving on to Enola Holmes 2. So I am a big fan of Enola Holmes 1 that came out a couple years ago. It was one of my favorite movies of that year. I honestly feel like it was a revelation for both Millie Bobby Brown, like kind of going beyond Stranger Things, but also for Netflix, kind of launching a new kind of original franchise of its own, and kind of having this female-driven, basically Sherlock Holmes detective story. And I really like this idea for a film series. Now, for the sequel, it's still very enjoyable. Millie Bobby Brown still shines as Enola Holmes. She's so great at fourth wall breaking. She has so much fun with it, and she leans into the awkward moments and the silliness and the exuberance she kind of like treats things with. This movie's really fun too because she also, like Enola Holmes, comes into contact with things about being a lady and kind of getting into more social customs of like um, how men and women are allowed to interact in this society and things like that. And she has to confront dancing and whether she has feelings for Tewksbury from the first movie and all these little things. And you might think that that's going to be really might get annoying and tiresome, but she really does a great job playing with this as Enola Holmes and how she kind of dances through it. Um, there's just a lot of good moments. I do feel like this sequel is definitely formulaic. It does follow a lot of the same patterns as the original one, even so far as, Sherlock has a case and Enola has a case, and by the end, they do kind of get more intermixed, and it feels a little forced, and it also feels like they still don't trust letting Enola have her own story, her own mystery, which I wish they had a little bit more confidence in, her being able to hold it her own, and not have Henry Cavill's Sherlock come in. I mean, he's really great in that role, and I think there's great moments within that. But I feel like they didn't have to necessarily do all that for this sequel. So this isn't quite as good as the first one, particularly because I don't know, maybe the novelty's worn off, but also just it is a little bit repetitive of the first one. I like how it addresses actual like women's history of the time, and it kind of the case itself has to do with kind of an actual real historical kind of like uh, event that happens, as far as women's rights within the workplace. Yeah, that's too hard to say, right? Yeah, a lot of W's and yeah. Anyway, but Enola Holmes 2 um, has a lot to work with, and I think it's a really fun movie. I give it 3.5 stars and a like. Okay, now we're moving away from Netflix and going back, you know, closer to the middle of September, I think it was, when I saw some of these movies for the first time, or beginning of October. So we're going to talk about Bros. So Bros is from director Nicholas Stoller, and this is and but he was also the writer along with Billy Eichner. But this movie really felt like Billy Eichner's baby. He's a producer on it, and he was a voice both in the movie, very strong voice within the movie, and after the movies come out. And I will admit that some of how the reactions have gone through and how he reacted to different people's reactions hasn't been great, but Bros, the movie itself, is still really a really nice movie, and I enjoyed myself within it. Bros was a very enjoyable rom-com. It was refreshing that in a lot of ways this was a story about gay men in a relationship that really just functioned as a regular rom-com. It follows a lot of the same tropes that a regular rom-com does. Um, they, you know, it should make sense that you know in a gay relationships they run into the same kind of insecurities or disagreements or kind of things that make relationships not work. Some things that are different, but some things are they're very much the same and relatable for anybody in a relationship. And I think that the movie tries to talk about how you know gay relationships are different, but they're also very much the same as the rest of them too. And even as much as the tropes in a rom-com, they do the same way. But I feel like Bros really navigate some of the especially like the third act, breakup sort of like kind of rocky moments, before the end of the movie much better because these two characters, Billy Eichner's character and Luke McFarlane's character, really do have some serious issues to kind of sort through on whether or not they would work out. There are some real insecurities between both of them that get in the way of them really being fully with themselves. They have some great moments of kind of being vulnerable with each other, and I love those scenes in this movie. They really are a great pairing in that, but they do have a lot of real issues too, and this movie does a good job of exploring those and not being cheap about resolving them either. Um, Sometimes they get resolved too quickly, but even this movie, it kind of leaves it a little open ended. Things are going well, maybe, but they could still have a chance to go wrong, and they realize that, and they're still kind of like working at and evaluating how their I don't know relationship goes. But Bros had me grinning and dawing so many times while also bursting out with laughter. I just love, yeah. Um, Billy Eichner is definitely like the one who gets the most attention with this movie, and he's really amazing as Bobby. But I honestly think that Luke McFarlane's character was the one who really won me over in this movie. He definitely, obviously he presents or he looks like somebody who just be this really broy um like jock kind of guy and just be somebody that you really wouldn't like or wouldn't kind of get in touch with his sensitive side or whatever. But honestly, he has so many great vulnerable moments in this movie. He has so much sensitivity and he plays it so well. When he does even open up more and break down with Bobby, and I don't know, he has just so many great moments, and I think he actually is the stronger performer in this movie. It's not really a competition, but he was the one that really impressed me in Bros. So I give Bros 4 stars out of 5. It's one of my favorites of the year. It's in my, I think, top 15 or 16 movies. We'll check that out at the end to confirm, but it's definitely rose quickly to the top of my 2022 ranks. All right, next up we have Amsterdam. Um, so yeah, Amsterdam is a big giant nonsense of a mess. Um, um, yeah. So I was originally pretty excited about this movie. So I do have sort of a love-hate relationship with David O. Russell movies. I do really love Silver Linings Playbook and some of the things he does within his movies, and The Fighter is really good. Uh, However, I feel like he started to get away with a lot of things with American Hustle because of like the reputation he had gathered from his previous movies. And American Hustle was treated as this like award contender, and I think it's mainly off the backs of the star-studded cast that he has, and like they're very good character actors, and they're basically doing the work for him, and the script and the story isn't actually as solid. And I actually contend that, you know, that movie, American Hustle, isn't really that good. It's just the the actors, the characters kind of make it work. And Amsterdam, like I started to realize the similarities between American Hustle and Amsterdam as it was coming out, and I started to worry. And my worries came true because Amsterdam, honestly, in some ways, is a much messier um, version of American Hustle. But basically, the only reason I like this movie at all is because the actors do such a good job within these characters at making me like them, even though the writing is bad. Like the story is complete nonsense, and so convoluted at different points, and eventually it gets to a point in the end that sort of makes sense, but like the journey along the way is, I don't know, chaotic and not very fun, except that you get to follow these very eccentric characters, and these actors are very good at playing eccentric characters. I don't really like anything that they're saying. Sometimes I don't like how they're saying it. Um, so even like how they're directed to perform, sometimes they give very not wooden performances, but like, uh, I don't know. It's just a weird way of the line being presented, that doesn't feel very natural. Maybe I guess that's wooden, but I think there's a better word for it than that. Um, Margot Robbie's maybe the only exception where she doesn't have any line. I feel like she's the only one that doesn't have any line reads that go that way. And of course, she's so great at playing a mercurial character. Christian Bale is so good at playing an eccentric character. John David Washington does a really good job playing off the other two of these. They're really great. Rami Malek nearly steals the show in a supporting performance with this movie. Like every scene he was in, he had me chuckling just by like how he is, and um, like so much stuff he's saying is really stupid, and the stuff in the scenes is dumb, but like the way he just carries himself is really interesting. Anya Taylor-Joy is a little hard to um, is a little difficult of a character to get with in the beginning, but as the movie goes along, she actually like gains some layers, and actually her character really works very well as a whole by the end. And then Robert De Niro actually gives a really good performance. Like it's so weird that he's in this movie, but he is one of the highlights of this movie as well. So Amsterdam does have enjoyable things because of the actors and the characters, but good luck tracking this movie because it's ridiculous. And poor Taylor Swift. I um, Either she just maybe she's not a good actress, but I feel like she was also directed very badly. She was giving a lot of line deliveries much the same way as some other actors were given, and it just really comes off as amateurish with her. And then her character's treated not very well within this movie, obviously. I'm not going to really go into spoilers, I guess, although it's part of the premise, I guess. But um, yeah, she doesn't have a very glamorous role, I guess you could say. Um, yeah, so Amsterdam is an interesting movie to get through. Yeah, so this is like David O. Russell giving into kind of his worst habits as a director and a writer. Um, there is a lot of fun stuff in this, but I think the actors are bailing him out. Um, sure, I'm sure he writes a lot of the characteristics of the characters that they're playing, but these are such great actors that they're the ones that are doing the work to bring them to life, or at least it seems like it to me. And this just feels like American Hustle 2.0, which is a movie that has really good actors, really good characters, but not really a very good movie. I give this 3 stars, and I do give it a like, but it's really just because I like Christian Bale and Margot Robbie as character actresses, and Robert De Niro and Rami Malek. That I know. At some point, I do wind up finding I like enough of this movie, but it's definitely flirting with being ranked lower. Okay, let's move on to Pray for the Devil. This was one of the horror movie new releases. I was gonna try to work into horror movie makeup, but I just ran out of room, ran out of time. I did see it in time, but I just couldn't put it into the episode in time. There was just, yeah, that's just how things work sometimes. But anyway, Pray for the Devil. There's also just not a ton to really say about this movie. This was a movie that I was seeing trailers about for a really long time before it. I feel like there's been trailers for this movie since before the summer movie season, and definitely all through the summer movie season. Um, and I was kind of intrigued, even though possession movies aren't necessarily my favorite thing. Uh, but I was interested because it looked like, they were going to take a look into like the history and kind of like the practices of exorcism in modern society, or like, and kind of how exorcism is taught through history and now, and also like incorporating a woman into that, which, previously women are forbidden from being taught or performing exorcisms. And certainly Jacqueline Byers playing Sister Anne is basically kind of breaking down boundaries a little bit, because she has a, I don't know, special connection with the devil. That stuff is kind of dumb. But I do really like how this movie kind of like, I don't know, has like the setting of this Boston um, facility that basically teaches both exorcism but also houses possessed people. And it's this interesting combination of like, um, nowadays, I guess is how they say it, psychiatry and the church have to work together, so that, they have to be kind of checked out by a psychiatrist, and kind of rule out psychiatric medical issues before an exorcism, like the rites of exorcism can be performed with a person. So it's this interesting blended kind of facility, and Virginia Madsen plays like the lead psychiatrist in there. So it's this interesting kind of like dynamic, and that's the stuff that's interesting to me. But I also really like this actress Posey Taylor, who portrays this little girl Natalie, who is possessed and within this facility. And it seems like Sister Anne is able to develop, a good relationship, a good rapport with her. Um, really starts exploring how you can incorporate, Sister Anne tries to incorporate compassion more into the approach with exorcism, within like treating somebody who is possessed, um, and is trying to break boundaries within that as well. And you definitely see it come through within this character, but also she's just really good at playing a possessed girl. The difference between her being lucid and kind of like just talking normally, but then also like creepy when she's being more taken over by the demon inside, I guess. Um, the effects work and makeup are really good within this too. I think that helps her a lot, but she does give a really good performance. And there's this one image of like her in the back of this ambulance that is just really amazing, a really amazing horror image. That give this movie points. But this movie, I don't know, this movie ultimately isn't really very special for a facility that's as top secret, not, I don't know, not top secret, but like high security as it is. They really have a good, like her and her priest buddy that helps her out really have an easy time of getting around security procedures and getting into places they're not supposed to get into. And I feel like it would be a lot harder to get certain things done in here. And Yeah, certain things just happen too easily, and certain consequences don't seem like they're as harsh as the Catholic Church would typically dole out. They're given a lot of leniences that I just feel like isn't very realistic just to make the story work better. There's some issues with that. Um, but I was interested in the stuff they were trying to explore in here with like kind of like how to treat exorcism in the modern era and then what women can bring to it and things like that. Um, and I just like history of things. I'm not a religious person at all, but I am interested in it from a historical perspective, and this movie definitely explores that. So I don't know. Pray for the Devil had enough things that were interesting to me. It had some good like imagery as far as the possessed go. It didn't. There wasn't enough for a facility that's supposed to contain a bunch of possessed people. They didn't really go into a lot of diversity within that. I thought they could have been really creative with like how this facility works and how many different possessed people they are, but you don't really get all of that. So just because of that, I give this 3 stars and a like because I just felt like this movie could have given us a little bit more than it did. It gave me enough to like it, but there was still some things missing as well, I think. Okay, we're moving on to Triangle of Sadness now. This is a film written and directed by Ruben Ostlund. I think this is the director of Force Majeure. I've seen different people talking about this movie. I haven't seen that movie, but I know it's fairly well liked. And This movie is interesting. So in most cases, it would probably be maddening how unabashedly unsubtle Triangle of Sadness is. However, Triangle of Sadness is one of the funniest movies of the year in just how brazenly it shouts at its audience, sometimes literally, about its themes of classism, sexism, capitalism versus socialism, and just the dynamics of human nature and how people manipulate each other. It is also just very funny to see these wealthy, privileged people having the worst yacht cruise night of their lives and how they are useless when money has nothing to do with anything. This movie is really interesting because it's broken up into like basically 2.5 distinct parts. There's a lead in that's pretty short that just introduces like our main model couple, Carl and Yaya. Um, and it kind of like explores some of their relationship dynamics that deal with sexism and money and um, inequality between I don't know those things within a relationship and whether people manipulate like how much people manipulate each other within relationships whether they realize it or not. Then there's a yacht section which is just basically you get laid out like all the kind of like all the you basically have this microcosm of all the different classes in society um, and on this little boat and all these conversations that kind of delve into those sorts of topics and themes and just how these uber rich people are like insensitive to how much power they wield even when they think they're trying to like promote equality or like be nice people and I don't know, but it's just really funny in them like I don't know in their interactions. Woody Harrelson and as the American communist him interacting with the Russian capitalist shit salesman is some of the funniest sequences in the movie. And then there's an island section of this movie. If you've seen the trailers, you you've seen the deal, but like eventually a bunch of them wind up stranded on an island, and there's a whole nother that's a whole nother ball game in which Dolly DeLeon takes over the movie. She is barely a character before this point, but she completely takes over this movie and is amazing in it. Triangle of Sadness is not shy, and I appreciate that. I will say it does get a little tiresome having all the themes of the movie being constantly shoved in your face. There are definitely moments of, we get it. Most of the time, this isn't the case, though. and I find myself chuckling at the proceedings. But I wonder if this movie could have been even more powerful if it had some restraint in how explicitly it commented on itself. In general, I wore a smiley brand face instead of a grumpy band face while watching this. And I give this 3.5 stars out of 5 and a like. Oh, and also in the year of pretentious cruise movies, this does get a slight leg up over Death on the Nile as well. Just barely though. They're right next to each other on my rankings, as you'll see in a little bit. All right. So I probably could do a whole episode on Tar. Because I fucking love this movie. I have done a lot of thinking about it, and I often feel guilty about how much I love this movie. Um, and I do have a lot to say about it, but I'm much better at saying those things in written form. So I'm going to let my Letterboxd review mostly speak for itself, and I'll give you a briefer one here. But basically, Tar is a fascinating movie that I have struggled with how to rate and rank. But when it comes down to it, this film had me 110% captivated and enveloped every moment Kate Blanchett is on the screen, which is the whole movie. Um, Tar herself as a character is one of those figures that you can't help but get entranced by when they are speaking, or at least that was the case for me. Um, but you constantly feel a little guilty for falling under this spell, either because other characters tell you you should, or by the more time you spend with her to catch a glimpse of her more toxic, problematic side. For a movie about a conductor, there is no actual non-diegetic score, but the music in it and the sound design otherwise where she fixates on distinct sounds in the background is one of my favorite features of the movie. Um, Tar is a problematic figure, but this movie and Blanchett's performance is definitely one of the best of the year. So just to give a little bit more perspective on how I feel about this movie. So there's Blanchett's performance tied with the character of Lydia Tarr herself, but then there's also kind of the part of Lydia Tarr that you kind of have to try to separate from the actress and who that person really is and what they're like. And we are definitely challenged um, to wonder because we're seeing the movie through the perspective basically of this character. We're following along with her and we're learning things as she goes, and we're dropped right in the middle of her life too. Within basically a week of her life, a little bit over a week of her life, um, and so we're kind of learning things as we go, and we glean little things about her, and she's accused of different things. And as the movie goes along, you feel more and more confident that probably there is some validity to what's going on, but you know, you're seeing it through her eyes in a sense. So you're still kind of left with some doubt as you go along, which you're very transfixed. You're very like captivated by this person, but you're also like really torn as to like, oh, I shouldn't be rooting for this person or liking this person. I guess I don't know. So that's just kind of how this movie goes, and it's a little hard to deal with, but I kind of love that struggle in this movie, or I feel like I've come to terms with loving that sort of struggle with this movie. That's one of the things I've been wrestling with to know just how much I like this movie. So I will talk about one scene that I kind of like have I feel like maybe a differing take on, and I feel like it is important for me to talk about, at least as far as my experience of the movie. I'll go into better detail about it in my written review, but I still want to like give you a little bit of idea of it. But basically, there's a scene where Lydia Tarr is a guest lecturer as with a bunch of conductor students. Um, at this school in New York, I guess. Doesn't really matter where. But anyway, basically, she is very like confrontational in her style. But as far as my like perspective. I was like, this felt like the type of professor who is very like kind of confrontational and likes to challenge their students, kind of like to like trying to challenge them to rise to the next level of analyzing whatever they're supposed to be analyzing or learning what everybody's supposed to be learning. And that feels like what Lydia Tarr is trying to do. At least that's how I was taking it. And I was really like blown away by her in this scene. But like as the scene goes along, more and more characters are getting really pissed off by her. And I'm like, you guys are being a little oversensitive. And at one point, one person just walks out, and I was like, okay. And I guess one of the triggers is they start to have a separate the art from the artist conversation, which that's a completely valid debate, and it is. But there's different ways to look at that situation, and at least Tar in this situation, she is on the side of no, like we can't really factor into character because like this one person doesn't really want to address Bach, um, because he had a problematic social kind of like relationship kind of history that has come out in I don't know, years and years and years and years since. But basically, like, they're conducting students, and they're learning composition as well. Whether you like the person or not, like to just cut yourself off from studying the works of that person who is considered one of the masters, at least of the craft that you're learning. I feel like Tar is completely in the right in basically, I don't know, telling people in the class who are stupid for basically not being willing to analyze kind of the music of this person. And that's just kind of how I view the scene. Sure, maybe she was too abrasive at times, but I don't know. If I was a student in that class, I kind of would prefer to have a professor like that instead of one who's pedantic and just droning on and very boring. So I don't know. That might just be me. But anyway, Tar is a fascinating movie for sure that I will continue to think about over and over again for who knows how long. Blanchett seems to be a runaway favorite for lead actress Oscar after this performance. I think my favorite is still Mia Goth's combined efforts in X and Pearl, but I can't deny how much Blanchett drew me to this character. It is pretty interesting how a movie can enthrall you so much, but then also have you feel guilty and disturbed for feeling so. But maybe that is what makes Tar a special movie. This is a must-see of 2022. I give this 4.5 stars out of 5 and a like, and it does crack my top 10 for the year into the 9th spot. Okay, we're moving through it. I know it's 11 movies, so it's not going to be quite as short as I would like, but it's a lot to get through. I'm trying to do it shorter, and I feel like I've mostly done that, but you know, it's a lot of movies still. So we're going to talk about Till next. So Till is a really powerful movie from Chinonye Chukwu, starring Daniel Deadwyler. And in a year of 2022 where it's basically been just a great lead actress performance after great lead actress performance that carries a movie, Daniel Deadwyler as Mamie Till Bradley just brings this power. Like she just brings this powerful person, real life person to life, back to life, and just like she was one of the most important early pioneers in the civil rights movement, and you can see why Mamie was so influential. Till is a gut-wrenching film cataloging this mother's journey through losing a child in the most brutal, horrifying way and finding a way to make it mean something greater. For those of you not familiar, this is a story of the lynching of Emmett Till and basically the things that followed. Mamie, his mother, elected to have an open cast funeral and have pictures of the brutalized body taken in a magazine and for the world to see, and the open cast ceremony to be for many, many, many people to see just what happened to her son and kind of the travesty of lynching in general and tried to make change with it. And this story is also about her kind of making her way down to Money, Mississippi to be able to attend the trial as well. And basically, just this movie is just really great at exploring all the um, like just all the things that Black people during this time and in this region had to deal with. There are so many powerful scenes depicting this tragedy and eventual triumph. I don't think any of it would land with the way it should without Danielle Deadwyler's performance. I'm sure Till is one of the most important movies of the year for some people, but there is no doubt is a very difficult movie as well. I hope Till has provided so many with the powerful retelling of the Bo Emmett Till story. Um, they have probably heard and lived with for so many years since it originally occurred. But I hope Chinonye Chukwu and Daniel Deadwyler are celebrated the way they deserve with this amazing movie. I give this 4 stars and a like, and it's not in my very top of the list because I have a lot of movies I've seen this year and a lot of 4 stars, but it's definitely one of the best of the year, I think. Okay, let's move on to Banshees of Inisherin. Let's move on to the Banshees of Inisherin, and that's the last time I'm going to say that name because I keep stumbling over myself trying to say it. So this is the newest movie from writer-director Martin McDonagh, who's done movies like Three Billboards Over Billings, Missouri. I think I said that right. Ebbing, Missouri, whatever. Sorry, it's a long title. And he's also obviously uh, these two actors, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, were led by Martin McDonagh in Bruges, which is, I feel like you could call it a cult classic that has really been talked up and is considered one of his best movies, and people really love it. But anyway, The Banshees of Inisherin might get all the critics' accolades this award season, but it also gets some accolades and praise from me. Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Kerry Condon, and Barry Keoghan acting, and Martin McDonagh at the helm put on an incredibly quirky show. The Banshees of Inisherin, well, I guess I'm going to say it more than once, will make you awkwardly laugh, confuse you, feel sorry for these characters, and perhaps even look inwardly on yourself to wonder how dull you yourself are, or what ruts in life you might have found yourself in. There's also the mythic quality. There's also this mythic quality about the movie with the inclusion of this old woman who tries to communicate omens about the future, and almost a tall tale quality to how certain characters decide to settle their differences. McDonagh definitely crafted one of the most unique films of 2022, but feck, it is a weird one. Let me talk about. I am going to talk about the performances a little bit more. Brendan Gleeson, I think, is getting the most attention for his supporting. His, I mean, I guess they're basically both leads, but he is the supporting actor, and Colin Farrell would be the lead one. I think, as far as how award season will go. Maybe that's not how it will go, but we'll see. But anyway, feels like Brendan Gleeson is getting a little bit more praise than Colin Farrell, and Brendan Gleeson definitely. He is very this character is very steadfast in that he does not want to talk to Colin Farrell's character anymore, and he's very he has a very strange methods for trying to make sure that happens. And there's just so many funny conversations that come along with that. But he's very stoic in it. It's mostly Colin Farrell that brings the comedy in this movie, and just how mystified he is by this predicament, and like how he kind of like slowly, not really slowly, he unravels pretty quickly, of like this guy not wanting to be friends with him anymore. Not that he doesn't even want to be any friends with anymore, but not that he doesn't want to talk to him at all whatsoever on this very small island with very few people. And it's just like he has this very like inward kind of like look at himself as why, and like, yeah, this movie's very funny. I love the interactions with these characters, and Colin Farrell really plays this role well. I can't remember a time where he's played I don't know, such a pathetic character. Like he's always playing a little bit more of a confident character. I've never seen him really be put in this position where he's like really vulnerable and like introspective and uh, I don't know. Uh, things like that. So it's interesting to see him in this, and I think he does it really well. But I think almost Carrie Condon as his sister, um, Siobhan, is actually she might steal the movie. She's definitely the voice of reason within this group of men that are just a bunch of dummies. Um, they are all very funny, but she's especially very funny at how she gets fed up with a bunch of their bullshit and decides to call them out on it. And like she has her own really great character arc as well. That's very nice. So Carrie Condon is definitely one of the better parts of this movie. The Banshees of Inisherin is a peculiar composition of good acting, comedy, and baffling and shocking character decisions that I mostly enjoyed. Ultimately, it does verge into the too weird for me territory to move it higher up on my 2022 list, but McDonough proves again that he is a masterful fiddle player when it comes to mixing eccentric characters in his stories. I give The Banshees of Inisherin, which apparently I've said that like 10 or 11 times now, and I don't have a problem with it anymore. 3.5 stars out of 5 and a like. All right, we're on the last one now. It's Armageddon time. I guess the end of all things, all time. But in this case, it's just the end of this episode. Well, not quite, but it's the last movie review of this episode. Armageddon Time was a movie that I wasn't on my. It started off not in my radar at all, and then awards season, I started like hearing more things about it, and as trailers started to come out more about it, I was like, oh. I might actually really like this movie like because it had like characteristics kind of similar to like Belfast or Come On from last year with like this younger like this coming of age story of a kid and kind of like something seen through a child's eyes and with it being a period piece in the early 1980s and kind of like a kid growing up in that similar to like how Belfast was kid growing up in the troubles um, in Northern Ireland. Uh, like I felt like maybe they would have enough similarities that I would really like this movie. Unfortunately, Armageddon Time was a big letdown. Um, honestly, it comes down to this kid being like the absolute worst. Uh, I guess Banks Repetta is giving a good performance, but like this little kid is he's a little shit, and he's like this very spoiled, bratty kid that I don't know has a lot of privilege and doesn't realize it. And I don't think he ever really fully realizes it, even by the end of the movie. He does kind of slowly gain kind of lessons as the movie goes along, but I feel like he makes his most grievous error by the end after he's learned so much and he's still I don't know. He's spending so much time trying to do right by his friend, who Jalen Webb plays Johnny, his black friend that he went to public school with, and then he gets transferred to private school. But basically, as nice as it is that he was willing to be friends with this kid, he still winds up um, knowing better by this point, putting his friend in risk of like real serious trouble by something he wants to do for really stupid reasons. And it just feels like he doesn't learn any of the lessons. He has he has some great conversations with Anthony Hopkins as his grandfather. Um, that basically, I mean, he sort of tries to follow those uh, lessons, but then he completely forgets about them and throws them away. And really just royally screws over his friend by the end of the movie, and he can't do anything about it. He tries to make up for it and take responsibility, but it doesn't matter anymore by that point because the damage has already been done. He's already a white kid, and his friends are still a black kid, and he has privilege and the other doesn't, and he's going to get a leg up and the other won't. And I guess that's what this movie is trying to say. It's this bleak kind of look at what the early 1980s was, but it also feels like um, I don't know, but it also feels like it's a little grosser. Because it's almost like the moral of the story winds up being, yeah, life sucks, and you can get lucky because of your advantages, and others will get screwed over, but you got to make the best with that shitty leg up. Like, and he isn't happy with it, but okay, you should have done better, kid. I mean, he's a young kid, and I guess you can have some compassion for, a kid growing up and getting into trouble, but I don't know, he's a hard pill to swallow. If you guys watch this movie, I think you might understand. But anyway, this is not really what I was hoping for at all. Um, Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I get infuriated by things in this movie. There's a lot of really sweet moments in this movie, and it's the stuff I was really wanting to see from this movie, and it just didn't go to the places that I wanted. I guess I wanted it to, or it didn't feel satisfying, at least by the end, whether I wanted it to or not. And yeah, so I give this 2.5 stars out of 5, and I don't give it a like. Um, yeah, I was hoping this would be one of my favorites of the year, and it wound up being one of my least favorites of the year. Okay, now that I've talked about all the movies, I am going to go through and adjust and show you my adjusted rankings. I'm going to try to go through them very quickly. I'm going to try to go through this each time I do what's new, just like I have before. But obviously, I'm going to try to do quicker reviews, but also quicker recaps of these sorts of things. I'm basically just going to show you where they are and then move on with it because I've already talked about why I do or don't like them or how much I like them. Anyway, um, like I said, Tar does break my top 10 as of right now of 2022. It is in the number 9 spot, just ahead of X and Pearl. They're pretty much in the 10, 11 spot, nearly a tie for like the end of my top 10. Tar might even make its way up past Emily the Criminal before it's all said and done. Tar has done a lot of moving already just in the few days since I've seen it. But right now it is at my number 9 out of my 74 watched so far this year. If we scroll down a little bit more, Bros is in at the 16th spot. Um, it's just above Nope and Chippendale Rescue Rangers, behind Fresh and See How They Run. Till is just behind The Woman King at number 21 and just above Black Phone and Cha Cha Real Smooth as well. Um, if you if we move out of the 4-star movies I watched for the night, if you remember, I have a lot of 3 stars, 3.5 stars, and a like to share with you. So Triangle of Sadness is the first one, was my next favorite of the group tonight. It is just behind Bullet Train, Breaking, and Mom. And just ahead, like I said, it is just barely ahead of Death of the Nile as far as messed up high class yacht cruises, um, and a little bit ahead of Uncharted and Sonic 2 as well. And then we get to Wendell and Wild, which is just behind Sonic 2 and just above Elvis. Then we have Banshees of Inisherin, just above The Atom Project and Enola Holmes 2, just above Belle and Lightyear. Then we have Do Revenge as a 3-star and a like movie, the highest 3-star and a like movie that I have, yes, above The Bad Guys, Marry Me. Then we have Amsterdam, which is just above Don't Worry, Darling, and The Princess. Then we have Pray for the Devil, which is a 3-star and a like movie as well. And what's interesting about this one is I do have it ranked below like Barbarian, which I've talked about before, that I have a little bit higher up than I would because I didn't like the movie, but I feel like there are a lot of special and unique things about it. There's just enough things that I didn't like about it that were detractors that I don't know. Anyway, um, but Pray for the Devil basically just didn't really have a lot that was special about it, so that's why it's below that movie. And then if we go down to the last one of this grouping was Armageddon Time. It's 2.5 stars and no like, and it's I guess the highest of the 2.5 stars, but it is in my bottom 10 of 2022, just barely, and it's just above Smile, just behind Dog for the year. So that gives me a little bit idea of how my 2022 is updated. I do have a really short let's make a list, but it's not really let's make a list and more like updating for what's going to happen next time in future episodes. Okay, so my next movie project is going to be my Alfred Hitchcock project. Um, Basically, how I've constructed this is over the last few weeks, I've been building basically this list of what are the most essential and hallowed Hitchcock movies. Um, like if somebody was, because his filmography is so massive, like to be a true completionist of all of his movies would take so long, and I can't do that. But uh, I think that it is reasonable to say that you can, come up with 20 to 25 movies that are the most essential from him to see. And I actually have 27 here, but don't worry, I'm not going to watch all of these. So before this, I had seen five and a half of his movies. Yeah. Um, and I say half because To Catch a Thief, I've definitely seen the whole thing. However, I watched it very distractedly, and I've been meaning to rewatch it for a long time. And I remember so little about it that I can hardly count it as seeing it. Um, it's just, sometimes you see a movie and you just aren't able to pay quite enough attention to it, and that's just how it was with that one. That will definitely be one I try to rewatch during this project. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to watch all of the ones that I have not seen because I just came off a month where I did watch 31 movies for horror movie makeup, and that's too much. But I am going to pick out 13. I think that's an uncomfortable enough number for Alfred Hitchcock, and we're going to be doing hefty helpings of hefty helpings of Hitchcock in November. So to go along with the Thanksgiving theme at the end of the month, I guess. We're going to be having our Hitchcock helpings for this project. So basically, the ones I have seen are Psycho, Rear Window, North by Northwest, Vertigo, The Birds, and then sort of I've seen To Catch a Thief. But the rest of these are fair game. But I have picked out the 13 that I am going to be watching, and then the rest I'll have to get to at another time. And I'll kind of scroll down and show you what the whole list is. The way I did this is I didn't get as many recommendations as I wanted to, so I had to go through a bunch of rankings lists that already existed between different publications. I did like comparisons at what people felt like were the top ones and what lists mentioned what movies, and just kind of was able to come up with 27 movies. I think it's really truly 24 movies, but I have a couple more on there at the end just because um, I'm not familiar enough to really fully rule those out. But anyway, Psycho is definitely one of the highest ones up there. Rear Window, North by Northwest, Vertigo, The Notorious. I'm definitely going to be watching Notorious as one of the 13 for this month. Rebecca, I've had on my Real Regrets to Remedy list for a long time, so it's definitely going to be on the 13 that I watch. It's one of the most acclaimed of his movies for sure. The Birds obviously gets a lot of acclaims. I think some people like to make fun of the birds, but if they really actually watched it, they wouldn't because it's a very good movie and it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite Hitchcock movies and horror movies in general. Um, and then his two train movies, Strangers on a Train and The Lady Vanishes. We've talked about these before when I did my Locomotive Lollapaloozas compilation list that you guys helped me build, and these two are both on there. And so I'm definitely going to be watching them for the 13 of this project for letterboxing. For the letterboxing series, Shadow of the Doubt from 1943 uh, is talked about a lot and ranked very highly. I don't know very much about it. That's all I'm going to say about it. The 39 Steps, that's going to be Shadow of the Doubt, and 39 Steps is going to be on my list. Foreign Correspondent is on the bubble, but I think I will end up watching it. Rope is on my list of 13. It's next up. Dial M for Murder. Many people have heard of this title. I certainly heard of it before this, but it definitely wasn't like the highest ranked of his movies, but is definitely talked about a lot within the list I saw. Then we have Suspicion. This is where we start getting into, after To Catch a Thief is where we start to get into the blurry area of whether I should have included it or not, or how highly acclaimed it is. But Suspicion's in there, and actually Suspicion is one I'm going to save for another time. Um, because there was kind of some mixed reviews on it, and it felt a little too similar to some other things. And I wanted to watch some of these other ones that sound more interesting to me, like Lifeboat. It's about a bunch of people trapped on a lifeboat, and that just sounds really fun to me, really interesting to me for a suspense thriller like Hitchcock does so well. So I think he do it well. I've also heard a lot of things about Marnie, both polarizing things, but also that it's a good movie and good performance from the lead actress. So I'm interested to see that. So I'm going to include Marnie in my list. Frenzy, I'm going to have to save for another time, but a lot of people talk about it highly. It's one of his later movies, but they talk about it a lot. Spellbound sounded like an interesting movie, but I won't include it in my 13 this time. The Man Who Knew Too Much. It's actually, he remade his own movie, and this one here is the remake you know, um, with yeah. So he actually remade his own movie, and this is actually the remake with Jimmy Stewart, his longtime collaborator, Jimmy Stewart. Um, and yeah. So anyway, that's this movie. I am going to say that for another time because I've seen different versions of this story. So I don't feel like it's as essential for me to watch right now, but I definitely will have it as one of the things I try to get to after this 13. The Lodger is one of his first movies. It's one of his silent film offerings, and I want to include it in my 13 just to get like a sense of that part of his career, even though it's lower down and how it's ranked and stuff. But it sounds really interesting to look at the beginning of his career that was so vast. The Trouble with Harry was recommended by some people, but I won't be able to include it this time. Sabotage and Saboteur sound very similar as far as titles, but seems like very different movies. But I'm gonna have to save those for another time. They were just a little lower acclaimed. Saboteur might even be one that just completely gets knocked off, and I don't ever watch because I don't know, it maybe doesn't seem as important. It's definitely the lowest rated of these 27. And then The Wrong Man and I Confess. I'm not sure if I should include those, but they got a few recommendations in a few lists that I looked at. And they sound interesting enough, I guess. So I'll maybe include them at a later date when I try to revisit Hitchcock. So anyway, that's my Hitchcock list that I have that I'm going to work through, and I'll work through 13 in November with hefty helpings of Hitchcock in November, and then I'll get to the rest at some other time. But I'm really excited for this project because this is a director I just don't really have a lot of exposures to, but also it will give me more exposure to classic era movies. So this will definitely give me some exposure to a filmmaker that from classic era that will be interesting to kind of like journey through, I think. Okay, so that takes care of pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Obviously, mm, it did take a little bit longer to talk about 11 new release movies, but I am going to try to streamline that segment going forward. And hopefully that doesn't affect the quality of the show too much, but I want to spend more time on movie projects like the hefty helpings of Hitchcock in November. So um, those are the sorts of things I want to really focus on with the show. I want to have more room to do let's make a lists as I go through projects. And, um, having so many segments is fun, but it also can be a lot of work and it can make these episodes overlong at times. So I really have to start trying to prioritize when and how and to include different things. So that's what I'm working on with this show and this channel. But anyway, you can check out my movie reviews at Letterboxd at Commentatoring N. So if you don't follow me already on there, jump over and follow me, and you can basically read through the much longer reviews of these movies I talked about this time. I spent a lot of time on reviewing these movies in written form, and just did a very short version of them for this show. And I do have a lot to say about these movies, and I hope you guys go and check out at least some of them that interest you. But also you can follow me on Twitter at Commentating N as well. I try to share the links for these episodes, but also some of my Letterboxd reviews and stuff that maybe don't make it on the show or some other things. So just follow me over there and maybe you'll find something interesting as well. Or help me spread some stuff around. That would be helpful too. Always can use some help spreading the word about this show and the things that I'm doing. So anyway, this has been Letterboxing with Commentating Nerd. Catch up on what's new. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Letterboxing with Commentating Nerd.